Alright, so we're going to talk a little bit about positioning and background images in CSS. So when it comes to positioning, there are a few different options, and let me just pull something up here. Alright, so position property. We have 4 different position values. There's static, there's relative, fixed, and absolute. Now static that's the default. Okay, everything is positioned static by default. Okay, they're not affected by top, bottom, left, right properties. It's as it says, it's not positioned in any way. It is always positioned according to the normal flow of the page. All right, so very rarely do you actually assign something to a static position unless you're changing it from something else, from absolute or relative or whatever it may be. Now, relative is positioned relative to its normal position. So we can set the top, right, bottom, and left properties of a relatively positioned element, and that'll cause it to be adjusted away from its normal position. So you can see this is a relative element here, and it has the property left 30 pixels, so it's going to push it 30 pixels from the left. Now fixed is relative to the viewport, which means it always stays in the same place. All right, so it's not really paying attention to anything else on the page except its position in the actual browser window. All right, so that's what fixed is. And then absolute can be positioned relative to the nearest positioned ancestor. So if this is an absolute positioned element and this one is relative, then you can actually move this around this element. Okay, this one is its container. So you can move it over or down or up or wherever you want. All right, so let's jump in and I'll give you some examples. So let's create a div with the class of wrapper. All right, and then inside there we're going to have a div with the class of inside. All right, and then I'm just going to give these some styles. So we'll say wrapper, and we're going to give it a border. And let's give it a width of 400 and a height of 400. All right, and then we'll say dot inside. Give that a border as well. We'll make this one red. And then we'll set width to, let's say, 300 pixels. Actually, let's say 200. And then a height of 100. All right, so let's take a look at that. What happened here? Oh. Okay, so we have this wrapper box or div, and then we have the inside, and you can see they're positioned normally. This one is starting at the top left here. Now let's go to the wrapper, and we're going to set left. We'll set 50 pixels. All right, and then if we reload, you can see that it's not doing anything. That's because it's still positioned static, which is default. So if we were to say position relative, now you can see it moves over. We can also move it from the top. We'll say 100 pixels, and that's going to push it down. Now if we want to move the inside box around inside its relative container, what we want to do is position that to absolute, and then let's say top 20 pixels and left 50 pixels, and reload, and now you can see it's going from here down 20 pixels, from here over 50 pixels. And then if we were to make this fixed and save, you can see that it goes back to its original position and none of this has any effect on it at all. Alright, so I'm just going to make that back to absolute. So the next thing I want to look at is background images. Okay, so let's take this wrapper div and add a background image to it. Now you should have in your resources, in your folder for this section, you should have a bg.jpg, which is just a sample image that we're going to use for a background image. Alright, so what we'll do is go into the wrapper class here, and let's say background dash image, and we're going to say URL, and in here you need to put a path to your image. Ours is in the same folder, so we'll just say bg.jpg. Save that, and now you can see we have the image as the background. Now the image ends right here. Notice that it keeps repeating the image. That's because by default it's going to repeat both on the x-axis and the y-axis. Now if we were to go in here and say background repeat and set it to no repeat, reload. Let's see, what did I do wrong? Oh, we don't want the quotes. Now you can see that it's not repeating, and it's not repeating either way. I'll make this a little wider to show you. Okay, so it's not repeating either way. We could say repeat, which is the default, just repeats both ways, or we could say repeat X, which will make it repeat horizontally, or we could say repeat Y, which would make it vertical. Okay, but we're going to keep it at no repeat, which I think should be the default, but for some reason it's not. Okay, so let's say we wanted to position this differently. If we wanted to move it over, we could say background dash position, and let's say 100 pixels 0. Okay, so if we reload, now you can see that it moved over to the right 100 pixels. So this number here is from the top down. So if we say 100 pixels, that's going to move it down 100 pixels. Alright, now this is kind of long having all this. We could shorten this up by just saying background and then doing URL. And say no repeat, 100 pixels, 100 pixels. Okay, and then what I'll do is just comment this out and reload, and we have the same thing. Alright, you can even change the color behind the image. So if we were to say, we'll put black here, save, reload, and now we have the image. We also have the div has a background color as well behind the image. So we're going to go ahead and stop here, and in the next video we're going to talk more about the more advanced aspects of CSS3.